Hey guys, I'm just checking in today with one of my old school besties out in DC, Jamel Clark. Um, he's a beast. There's so much to learn from him. I learn from him all the time. We've been connected, I think, for I don't even know, like 6 or 7 years, maybe.
It might be longer than that.
It might have been longer than that. Every day is kind of like the same now, but he is the regional director for Elevate Interval Fitness down in DC. I've taken a bunch of their classes back when I was living down there. That's how we continue to stay connected. But we're going to chat nutrition today and kind of call this like a coach's corner. And he's going to offer some advice. We're going to just chime in, make it a conversation, but hopefully you guys leave here today with a little bit of information and insight around your weight loss journey or just your fitness journey. So Jamel, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more, and then we're going to dive right into a couple of questions surrounding macros.
All right. Well, my name is Jamel Clark. Welcome, everybody. So looking forward to this conversation. I don't get to talk to Serena that much, so this is going to be pretty awesome. Quick background for me is that I started most of my fitness journey around bodybuilding. So I actually went right in, jumped right in, no toe in the water, into the deep end, and really confused. But I progressed out of that and sort of eventually evolved into a personal coach over time. And I tend to focus a little bit more on the strength side of most people's training, but it often includes some nutritional counseling and direction. Although I will preface it and say that, I'm not certified nutritionist. But because of my experience personally, and then as well as with my clients, I guess I have good insight for Serena to use for you guys.
Yeah, that's what's up. And just a blanket statement there, like you evolved, like that word evolution, that word evolve, there's something to always learn and take in as you're aging as a human, as you're evolving as a trainer, as you're evolving as a fitness goer and a health advocate. There's literally like no end to this, right? There's like always something to learn. And
Absolutely.
coaches don't have all the answers, so that we're constantly learning as well. So that's just a point to make.
I totally agree with that. It's all evolutionary.
It is. It is. So, everyone wants to lose weight. So obviously, we've both worked with probably hundreds of clients at this point, and one of the most common goals of all time is I want to drop weight. So one thing I do right away is to, of course, look at their lifestyle and understand what's going in. What are they intaking? What exactly are they eating on that macro balance chart? Their proteins, their carbohydrates, their fats, is their sugar off the mark? I take a peek at all of that stuff. So when we're kind of calculating and assigning macros, Jamel, how do you know where to start someone? Do you use an algorithm? Do you use a calculator? Do you kind of have like a blanket set that you go in at with clients and see how their body reacts to after the first couple of weeks? Like, what's your strategy in terms of like getting people set up with their macros?
So with the macro piece, for most of my clients, that tends to happen down the road. Because I have to get a good picture of what they're doing. And when you start with a personal coach or personal trainer, one of the mistakes that I found early on when I started it was that people try and change too much at once. And from a scientific perspective, you don't know what's working. So you just started with a new coach. You don't know what their style is like. You don't know what the programming is going to be like. But you're also starting some sort of and now if you lose 10 or 15 pounds, you have no idea which thing you need to change. So when I start with the nutrition piece, I tend to look at what they're eating overall. And then I try and add in more healthy foods, more whole foods. And then as we start to do that and they're more used to eating a little cleaner maybe, or there's a little bit more stability and consistency with what they eat and the types of foods that they eat, then we have time to sort of like dive into the details of the macros and start to actually look at the numbers so they can understand what they mean. Because if you start too early, you may have, a bunch of foods that they probably shouldn't be eating in the first place, or they may need to bring those numbers down of those foods. So being on a much cleaner and consistent nutrition plan to begin with is going to make looking at the macros a lot easier, because it's going to be really hard to calculate where the macros stand with something that's very, very processed in nature.
Mm-hmm. The
Um,
quality obviously kicks into play there. Um,
yeah. And
and
then
go ahead.
I just, I tend not to start with like a very general baseline for people.
Right.
Like I can use across all clients, just because every individual is different and the food is going to affect them different. So I tried starting off that way a long time ago, and I was like, this isn't working. I don't understand. And then
Yeah.
after I kind of got used to it, it was like, okay, I can't just start with like, a 30-30-40 split for people in regards to their proteins, fats, and carbs. So once we get past the cleaner eating stage, or more into it, not necessarily like a final thing, because there's going to be some evolution, like we just said, it's going to evolve a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get into tracking and seeing what the numbers actually mean.
Sure.
And once it's more consistent, then you can start to see like where they fall, where their numbers tend to fall in general. And then I start making adjustments from there. So usually, what I would see is the proteins tend to be a little bit on the low side for the average person, based on how they feel they should be eating in general. And then the carbs tend to be a little bit on the high side for most people.
Yeah.
Unless they, unless they're looking at it consciously and then they exclude carbs on purpose, it's usually on the higher side.
Yeah. I absolutely see it. When people start tracking, I mean, I've had some folks even just in the past couple of weeks show me their starting protein numbers, and they were in like the 50s. And just from like a wellness standpoint, my main marker is to get people at least to 90. And then depending on their goals, of course, we go higher. But I mean, from like a biological standpoint, like we need more protein for our body to repair and recover, even from just daily movement, aside from adding on stress of weight training or running or whatever it is that that person does. So I fully agree. And then the carbs are just kind of like, all over the place. There's really no path, but they do trend towards the higher side. Now, when someone comes to you and says like, I'm keto, low carb, no carb, what's your first like thought on that?
My first thought is never what I say to them, first of all.
Right. Yes. Right. That's like a trainer secret, right? Where you're just like holding back like the true response. You're like, oh God, okay.
Push it down in my gut. I'll save that for later.
Yeah.
But that's usually the point where I start asking questions like, why are you on it? How long have you been on it? What's your overall goal? Have you tried other types of nutrition protocols at all? How long ago was it? I just started to go into question mode to kind of figure out like what started that, what prompted them to start doing that, and then what direction do we want to go in, and then what experience they have with that versus something else. And over time, it's not going to be immediate, just because it tends to be too much information for the average person that we deal with. But over time, I try to explain it to them and get them to look at the different styles. And it's a little bit easier if they tried more than one style or more than one protocol. And the overarching theme with just about every nutrition protocol is that they're all in a deficit. It just varies as to how the numbers are applied, in which direction they go. But when you look at them, they're all in a deficit. Some way, if you look at numbers completely, every single one of them is in a deficit, whether it's keto or paleo, low carb, any of those, they're going to be in a deficit when they try and maintain or stick with one of those protocols. And I try and get the person to understand it. Like, look, you're operating in a deficit, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the deficit is allocated toward the lift or workout style that you're trying to apply or that I'm trying to apply for them. So I look at that first, ask questions, and then see what their knowledge base is. And then over time, try to get them to understand that concept first, that it's going to be a deficit. So you don't have to follow that. You can just create a deficit calorically
Yes.
make your numbers a lot more even and reasonable to your lifestyle and your activity level.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, all diets essentially shift you into that deficit at the end of the day. Intermittent fasting, keto, Atkins, essentially the same thing. Anything. Yeah. So, and that point recently came up. I feel like in the industry as a whole, like that really, that point, I feel like I've heard more now from other coaches and some social media posts than I have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I guess is really obvious, but until you put words to it, it doesn't make sense until like you actually name it. What it is, what it is. Like you're basically lessening the intake in some way, shape, or form. All those like pre-made meals often come in much smaller portions than you ever would put on your own plate. You're probably cutting your portion size down at least a third, if not half. Obviously, that's going to cut out a couple hundred calories. If you intermittent fast, there's obviously other benefits to that, but you're essentially closing the window of when you're consuming. Another strategy to lessen the amount of time that you're eating to create a deficit. And if you remove an entire food group, then yeah, chances are that you're going to end up eating a whole lot less in some capacity. So let's talk a little bit about like expectation management.
Mm-hmm.
I think going in, there's kind of like, it's sad to say that there's like this expectation that's like already set that if I get a trainer and I start a program, like I'm going to see like instant results. And there's some truth to that, but a lot of it is on them to execute and to use the tools and resources that we give them as professionals to take that into their everyday routine, everyday lifestyle, and to essentially always keep learning to try to figure out what works. We're there as advocates, we're there as guides, we're there as professional resources, but there's so much time spent away from us that we need them to like, step into this kind of change. So talk to me about like expectation management, messages that you send right off the bat. Do you set expectations with your clients, or are you kind of creating that through your messaging or through your workouts? Like, how do we essentially set our clients up for success from the start, knowing that overnight results aren't really possible?
That one, it takes a while to sort of like work them out of that mindset. And you still have to, as a coach, you just have to meet people where they are. If their understanding of what you're going to provide, if you don't initially tell them that like, hey, that's probably unlikely. This is where I tend to focus people. This is what I'm going to give you. This is what I'm going to show you. When you start there,
Mm-hmm.
they're in a little bit more perceptive place as you start to progress and give them more information and provide more guidance. But I start off with that with pretty much every client, the whole Q&A and conversation, to let them know that I'm going to give you a lot more education and show you the things that you need to be doing that you can do on your own. But I also let them know that my overall goal is that you're going to be able to continue this and do this on your own. You should have to see me less. That's the overall goal. So we start off with twice a week. At some point, we should be down to once a week, and you should be hitting me with Q&A over time, whether it's email or text or whatever. And
That's a really good point.
That usually that softens the blow of, this is not going to happen immediately what you want. But it gives me an opportunity to bring up different aspects of what they should be changing or what they should be lifestyle. Every workout with a 2 to 5 minute blurb or consult or whatever you want to call it. But I kind of just throw things in there while well, I know you just finished doing all the squats, but let's talk a little bit about you not getting enough sleep. And
yeah,
not always the best time to bring it in, but if I give them those small pointers over time, they'll start to pick it up. And at some point, they're going to try one of those ideas.
Yeah.
And they're going to try it the way I told them to. And then they'll start to realize, oh, this does work this way, and then they start to focus on other aspects
Right.
of
Right.
how fitness is affecting them or how their nutrition is affecting them over time.
Yeah.
Whether, now all of a sudden you're getting better sleep, when you stop sort of like only looking at the macros, you're a lot less stressed about your workout and paying attention to like how your body feels, how your body moves,
Right.
the things you can do day to day. I have one client who he has two, I believe they're two mastiffs, and each one is over 100 pounds. They're huge dogs.
Okay.
One lays on one side of the couch, the other on the other, and he has nowhere to sit but the chair. And one of the first things he told me after probably about 2 or 3 months was that his shoulder didn't hurt anymore when he went to walk his dogs. Now, when we first met, his overall goal was to lose weight. He's over 40 like me, and his overall goal was to lose weight. And I was like, look, this is going to take a while. You didn't gain weight overnight, so you're definitely not going to lose it overnight. It's not like a hangover,
Yeah. Good call.
If you put it on over a couple of years, it's going to take some time to get it off, and it works the same way with muscle. If you put it on over 10 or 15 years and you're trying to shrink down, it's not going to come off in a record amount of time. So the same thing with fat loss. If you're focusing on that, I try and get you to focus on something that's a little bit more easy to conceptualize. So him walking his dog and now he doesn't feel pain. Oh, this type of workout or whatever it is that you're giving me is working. And then they start to focus in on that, because you give them something good and they're going to see that and they're going to respond a lot better when you come back with the next thing that they should try.
Sure. I just had a conversation today with a client about this, the scale just becoming the only thing that matters, and you, I'm sure, can automatically think of a few people you've worked with in the past. Like, I'm sure, like, it's just, I feel like we should get on the scale more often than not, but not as a tool, not as a negative. We want it to be a reminder that our body fluctuates pretty much every day. And I learned that tip from my good friend and macros coach who's up in Connecticut. She and I hopped on a call like a couple weeks ago, and she was like, maintenance calories are a moving target. You should get on the scale every day to understand that your body fluctuates literally every day. If you have a bad night's sleep, expect that scale to go up in the morning. Like all these reminders, right? That like there's not just like one metric that we should be basing our fitness journey off of, whether it like let that determine if we're successful or not, And when we talk about chronic pain reduction, I think that is one of the most powerful results from any program that you could get, aside from weight loss and whatever else you're working towards. I feel like most Americans experience chronic pain and chronic inflammation in some way, shape, or form. And to engage in a new routine and a new healthy program or a new eating regimen that yields a reduction in that, to me, is priceless.
Absolutely.
I mean, can you speak to that at all?
Well, it's funny because that's one of the other things that I tend to bring up over time with my clients is that, hey, one of the reasons that you might not be losing weight or you might not be achieving the goals that you want is, guess what? Your body's not moving optimally. Like, and I give them an analogy of a car when it comes to things like that. If you have a car, it's got 4 wheels, the tires are half flat, and you're driving in the sand, it's going to go. It's just not going to go very fast. Where if you're on the road and the tires are inflated, it's going to go the speed you actually want it to go. When everything is working optimally, then the result that you want is going to happen a lot sooner and a lot smoother. Go into a workout program, but if you don't move the right way, you may not be even incorporating the muscles that are needed to help to burn the calories to get to the weight that you want. They're like steps to the process. So you can do a push-up, and I've seen some people's push-ups. If you're using mostly shoulders and triceps, guess what? You're probably not going to burn nearly as many calories if you change your form and use the chest, because the chest is a bigger muscle, so the fuel that it requires is higher. And that's one of those things you just kind of have to get them to understand. When you're more optimally, everything's going to happen a lot smoother, a lot better, and a lot of times it's going to be a little faster than what you anticipate. You know, you can run and lose weight, but if your running stride was excellent, it's probably going to happen faster.
Mm, that's a great point. I think that's something I knew but never said out loud. I just finished my biomechanics specialist certification, and that basically teaches you how to move optimally and how to move as like in alignment as a machine. You know, it's the study of human movement. And I'm like a stickler more than ever now for slowing everything down. And when you slow things down, it may be a little harder, but you're bringing a lot more attention to the general movement, how you're engaging muscles, how you're interacting with the exercise, and now calorie burn. We're obviously making that connection, right? So great reminder on that. Circling back to so we don't have too much longer here, but like circling back to the macros and type of goals that you're working towards, right? So is it fair to say that training for weight loss and training for fat loss is different?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So I'm like, quiz question.
You can take your arm off and lose weight.
Yeah. So when we see these like before and after photos on social, there's actually a lot of coaches that I love following who post themselves like really ripped up and like toned and fit as they're after, weighing 5 or 10 pounds more than their like thin photo, where they were like, I was just clean eating and doing cardio and I looked seemingly healthy, but now they look like, you know, beast and they look awesome. And they're like heavier in weight, right? So when we're trying to tone up and drop fat, what do our macros look like? Are we going to be on a surplus? Are we going to be eating a whole lot more, or are we going to be eating much less to achieve that?
Well, that's a little bit tricky because, like I said, every individual is different. You know, you can lose fat with a slightly higher than normal. You may be in a surplus, but you're in a surplus. You may be in a surplus because your proteins are higher, which are required for your muscular activity and overall weight loss in general.
Right.
So
you mentioned to me a couple weeks ago to like focus mainly on proteins and fats versus the carbohydrate source.
Right, because from just living and breathing, carbs aren't essential in your macro calculator. Your fats and your proteins are. If those go down too low for too long, you know, you're going to start to have repercussions of that. Whereas if you have carbs too low for too long, not that big a deal unless you're an endurance style athlete or you're an athlete of some sort where you need that extra energy and that boost from your carbs.
And so that would come from someone who is lifting heavier often.
Lifting heavier often, or doing some sort of endurance style workout. A lot of CrossFitters and runners, they tend to need a lot more carbs than the average person.
Right. So if you're lifting, let's say 4 times a week, average, like your max lift is like something not compared to your world, like maybe 15s, 10s or 15s, like a moderate carbohydrate source would be sufficient. So as long as their protein was up pretty high and their fats as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And finding that sweet spot really where your body reacts best, right, is where you should end up kind of falling. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're going to play with that number based on not necessarily what your progress is. That's going to be a small portion of it, but how you feel and how your body reacts.
Yeah.
To activities and your day-to-day life. But I tend to keep the protein on the high side. And if it's already low, I have to work them up slowly to a point where I think they should be, which is usually somewhere around 1 gram per pound of body weight. And the only reason I give them one to one is because that number, that ratio, is easy to remember and easy for them to deal with when you're looking at calculations. The actual number is closer to like 0.70, but when you tell somebody to calculate that, they're going to look at you funny unless they're a mathematician.
Sure.
So I tell them 1 to 1. If they're, depending on how far away from that number they are, then we're going to start to work our way to that number over the next couple of weeks. And then once we get there, as we do that, we should be reducing in other areas to make room for it, because they're going to get full off of eating all that protein.
Right.
And then automatically, either the carbs or fats will go down. Ideally, we want the carbs to go down and leave fats where they are.
Right.
And then once you get them closer to what you want their ideal protein intake to be, then you can start to play with the other numbers and adjust them according to how they feel and move and how they're doing in their day-to-day life, as well as their workout or fitness activity.
Totally. I think that's all like super just helpful reminders. And a lot of this is being patient and understanding that, like I said before, my friend was like, this just isn't a straight line. Like it technically is, like, we know we're going in the right direction, but like the strategies, right, when it comes to the supplementation and the nourishment in terms of input versus output, that's a learning experience for both me for both of us as the coaches, and then also the client. And that's why when people say like, I learned so much about myself through the transformation over the past 3 years, like that's why fitness is transformative, because there is so much learning that takes place, not only about all the things that we just talked about, but about yourself, because there's so much negotiation that we have with ourselves. Like, am I going to work out? Am I not going to work out? Should I get up earlier today or should I not? Am I going to engage in that? Or am I just going to say, F it, I'm going to eat this pizza and I'm going to totally ignore what I'm doing? Like, there's all these decisions that we make all throughout the day that either get us closer to where we want to go or take us back. And when we attach a commitment to our fitness and have the right people around us, like in the coaches that you need to get yourself there, that's where your mind starts to change. And that's where I'm living a lot more now and trying to get my folks to understand and just pushing that messaging in my community. Because if your mind changes, then everything else changes. So if you have a strong mindset going into your fitness plan saying, hey, I don't really feel like working out today, but like, I know I'm going to feel better at the end. That's where you start truly growing and making like a real change in how you live your life. And that's why I love being in the health space and helping people understand that this is an opportunity to truly change your life in so many different ways. Yeah. So do you agree?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. And, a lot of people kind of look at everybody else when they're looking at, what the progress they made, what changes they're making. And I'll tell you from experience that, I'm 42 years old now, and my overall workout program, as well as my overall nutrition protocol, has probably changed like 5 times in the past 4 years alone. And I'm one of those people who I tend to change a little bit of each thing all the time just to kind of see what happens. I just want to see. I have no idea. Let's see what happens this time. But now when I do it, it's like, oh, well, I did this when I was 32. Let's see what happens when I'm 42, And so for instance, my baseline metabolic, shoot, I'm losing my words right now, but what I eat, my baseline maintenance, calories is so different now compared to what it was, just 3 years ago. It's completely.
What are your macros?
I tend to hover around the low side on carbs, which I don't really recommend for anybody. I think my body's just kind of used to it and it works well for me. And then over time, I'll add in more carbs just a little bit just to have that extra energy. But I tend to be somewhere around 20% just for the carbs, which is super low.
Yeah.
Much higher than that. But yeah, I usually end up around 20% for carbs, and then it's usually like an even split between my proteins and fats.
Okay. So what are you eating up to in terms of your protein, just for, conversation's sake?
I think I'm around 250
for protein
a day. Yeah.
For protein.
Yeah.
Dude. Yes. All right. Can we just Like, oh my God.
And
Like,
I weigh 220. So, that's around where I should be. That's not the norm for
mhm,
another 42-year-old who's my size.
mhm,
Even if they're keeping it with the same exercise regimen, it still may be a little bit different for them.
mhm.
Uh, but I fluctuate roughly 30 grams up or down for my protein,
Okay.
and that's without tracking. Now, because I've been doing it for so long, that's
Right,
what
right, right.
I know I'm going to consume that much on a regular basis, and it's easy for me. It's a little bit more on the intuitive side as well, but that's
Sure.
because I've been doing it for so long.
And that's something to speak to right there too. Like in the beginning, everything seems like a mountain to climb, especially like for someone who's only eating 50 grams of protein and we're trying to tell them to get to 130 or whatever. They're like, what the hell? And it's like, please let's work on it, because the second you start hitting those numbers on a consistent daily basis, just like you're saying, it can become intuitive. It can become natural for you just to gravitate towards these kind of same menu items in each category that is going to get you to that number without being like cornered and stuck having to log all the time.
Yeah,
You can absolutely get to a place where intuitive eating doesn't work against you, right? Like,
yeah,
but it takes a lot of time. Like, we've both been doing this for over 10 years. So it's like, like, if you're just starting the journey and you're watching this right now, like, it's truly a journey, right? And it's truly exciting because like there's just so much greatness on the other side. But like, everyone's different. I think that's a big takeaway today. And I think that everyone needs to work with a coach at some point in their life, even if it's just for a month, mainly because there's just a lot of crappy information that's out there. If you guys are ever looking for a trainer, like, please be sure that like they're certified, they know their stuff, they have some type of following, or they're part of a community that they're active in, and they have like credentials that are valid. I think like Instagram is just not the place to necessarily find your weight loss answers. I think it comes from a conversation. It has to come from a conversation, right?
absolutely.
Just because someone posted about another client, it can be inspiring and it should motivate you to want to get to a change or experience change in your life. But I wouldn't go down a path of removing things before you learn about why you're doing that.
Yeah. And if you're doing this on your own, ideally you want to do it with a coach so you get some guidance, because there's a lot to kind of like swim through, whether it's the myths you have to work through from social media, or it's the high level of science that gets involved and you just really don't understand it. You need somebody to translate. Ideally, you want to work with a coach, but even if you're not, you want to start with one thing. Change one thing, track one thing. That's the way I started. And it made more sense to me. And then it doesn't seem nearly as overwhelming. And you can take notes on everything that surrounds that, because everything's going to be affected by any one change you make. Do I feel better? Do I move better? Do I sleep better? Do I have less stress? Do I have more stress? What my relationships are like. What does my workout feel like? If you do anything, you change one thing. If it's protein, you change your protein, monitor it for a month, like really focus in on that one thing. I don't care about anything else, but I need to know what my protein intake it is. I need to know how often. Time of day is going to make a difference as well. But you change that one thing. Once you have that one thing down and it's about where you want it to be, then you can sort of get involved in something else. All right, now I'm going to change my carbs, or now I'm only going to focus on eating whole foods. And that's about where I am right now, is that, I can consume that much protein because it's all like whole natural foods. There's nothing in a can or a box. It was cut off a tree, pulled out of the ground, or it was in a slaughterhouse, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's all whole foods. There's
Yeah.
one ingredient in everything that I eat. There's one ingredient, and that's easier. One, it's gonna make it easy to track. Have you ever tried to track like macaroni and cheese from the box? There's so much stuff to write down. I don't have the time to do that. I write down something. It's all right. I had meat. I had I had potatoes,
Totally.
and I had kale. Okay, that's easy to put into my log. Just making life simpler.
That's
But
awesome.
change one thing, track one thing, and then go back to adding in additional items over time as you really start to get it and understand it. But I would really focus in on the protein one, because that one's probably going to have the biggest effect. It's going to give you the most bang for your buck.
That's awesome. I mean, great reminder. I think that's a good takeaway if you're listening and you're feeling overwhelmed. Just start with one thing. I mean, we could keep talking for hours on this. I feel like we're gonna have to do like a series or something. I guess like final thought, like maybe for the person who's like, I don't want to give up. I don't want to give up my whatever, my wine and my cheese and like la 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 la. Like, is it about giving up something, or is it so much about gaining something? And that truly is a mindset shift, of course. But what's like, I guess, a final thought on your end from this conversation?
Even my vices, because I even from the time that I was a kid, I love Doritos. Can't tell you why, but I love Doritos. I still have them.
Love a good chip.
Yeah, I still have Doritos. I still I eat ice cream. It's just not nearly as often. And you don't look at it as giving up something. And I don't even bother with that. If you have something you love, leave it in there. Just leave it in there. We'll see what happens. Leave it in there. Now we're going to go and change everything else about your habits and your mindset around, and watch what happens to that other thing. That's how I would deal with that. Because it doesn't matter how much you love wine. You're still going to have it, whether it's, 2 glasses a week or 1 glass a week. It's still going to be in there, even when you're at your fittest. It's still going to be in there. I still have beer on occasion, but a 6-pack lasts me like a month and a half.
Yeah.
And it's still, those things are still going to be there. There's nothing really wrong with that. And you need those kind of distractions sometimes. And they make you happy, especially when you're being social. You want to be like, oh, I can't drink wine, and the other 50 people are. Don't worry about that. Leave it in there. Have that wine. Don't overdo it. Focus in on everything else, and then watch how your body responds over time and how much you actually start to want whatever that vice or happy thing that sort of like jumps in every so often from time to time. But don't try and just wipe out that one thing unless it's something really bad.
Right.
It has to be extremely unhealthy, like smoking or drugs. Those you probably want to start to kind of wean off of. But when it comes,
I feel like a drink every day isn't the move. I'm not an advocate of that. And my clients watching this will be like, Serena told me to cut out drinking. And I mean, I don't think I ever said cut it out. I think it's more like, if you're having 6 drinks a week, let's cut it to 2 drinks a week. Because I simply don't feel like it's ever going to be the case where you're never going to have a burger again. You're never going to have cheese again. Like, I hate when people say, oh, I'm giving up whatever. Like, why? I'm kind of in that space with you as well. I just like to see a drastic decrease if that it's like that apparent. And then especially if it's alcohol, that it's like triggering other bad behaviors.
Yeah.
That's where for me it becomes like a non-negotiable, where it's like, hey dude, we really have to focus on this like habit building, because if you know that you have to have a cheese plate with your wine, that you're engaging with Zoom happy hours twice a week, that's like a ton of extra calories that is 100% going to stall you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where our job comes in, is
Right.
sort of analyzing where they are with whatever habits they have. And if it's over a certain limit, then yeah, we want to start to reduce these, because it creates additional bad habits that are going to either increase your calories or limit your mobility, or lower your libido, or whatever it is. It's going to affect your body. Whatever you're putting in, it's going to affect your body.
Right.
Whether it's good or bad, we're going to evaluate that. And then if it's one of those things that it's really bad, that it's contributing to other bad behaviors, then yes, we absolutely want to sort of like reduce those numbers in the beginning, or as soon as possible, to something more manageable, something more reasonable, where we can actually see the numbers. Because yes, if you consume too much alcohol, we can't tell what's going to happen, because it takes so long to leave your system, and then it takes so long for your body to actually respond to a system that doesn't have alcohol in it, that we can't. It's just really hard to start tracking numbers with that in a way. It just slows everything down.
Totally. Wow. Good reminder. All right. So I think I'm going to cap it here, because we're going to meet again. Obviously, this is going to have to happen again. But just if you guys are watching, there's so much to learn, and you can reach out to Jamel. I'll link out his information here. You always can find me at serenafit.com. But thanks for listening, and hopefully you learned something today. And if you found this helpful, share with a friend. Be an influencer in your community. You never know who you could really be helping at the end of the day. Thanks, Jamel, for being here. You're the bomb. And stay safe, and we'll see you next time. All right. Bye.